The rain turned to sleet against the windows of Valley View Gas and Go, blurring the endless parade of vehicles along Interstate 81. Lily Mason pressed her small palm against the cold glass, watching each car that slowed at the exit, her heart leaping with desperate hope before plummeting as they passed by. The same ritual she'd repeated for nearly 4 hours now. Mom will come back soon. She clutched the $20 bill in her other hand so tightly that Abraham Lincoln's face had creased into unrecognizable furrows, the paper damp with nervous sweat, edges softening like her resolve. Behind her, fluorescent lights buzzed above aisles of candy, chips, and travel necessities. The clock on the wall ticked past 7:30 p.m. Her mother had left at 3:45. "Wait right here, Lily. I need to make a call and get some things. 20 minutes tops." Her mother had smiled, but something in her eyes hadn't matched her reassuring tone. She'd pressed the 20 into Lily's palm, fingers lingering a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Get yourself a snack if you want. I'll be right back." The cashier, a heavy-set woman with fading red hair and a name tag that read Nancy, had been glancing at Lily with increasing frequency. Her looks had shifted from casual interest to outright concern as the afternoon stretched into evening. "Your mama coming back soon, honey?" Nancy called out, arranging a display of energy drinks. Her voice held the gentle twang of Appalachia, warm but tinged with growing suspicion. "Yes, ma'am," Lily answered automatically, the way her mother had taught her to address adults. The certainty of a child who still believed grown-ups kept their promises. "She's just taking care of some business." Lily's stomach growled, reminding her she'd eaten nothing since the peanut butter sandwich her mother had made before they'd started driving that morning. Where were they even going? Mom had just said they needed a fresh start after being evicted from their apartment in Raleigh. Lily had packed her few belongings in her school backpack, bringing along her treasured possessions, a small photo album, her favorite book about wilderness survival, and the bracelet her father had given her before disappearing from their lives 3 years ago. The bathroom door opened, and a truck driver in a flannel shirt and worn jeans emerged. He nodded at Nancy, bought a large coffee, and headed back to his rig. Lily watched him through the window as he climbed into his massive truck, its engine rumbling to life before it pulled away toward unknown destinations. Lily had always been good at reading adults' faces. She could tell when her teachers were disappointed, when bill collectors were about to cause her mother to cry, when strangers were safe or dangerous. And now she could read the truth in Nancy's increasingly troubled glances. Her mother wasn't coming back. The realization settled like ice in her chest, colder than the sleet outside. She'd been abandoned, left behind like the succession of apartments they'd vacated in the middle of the night, like the unpaid bills, like the string of her mother's boyfriends who inevitably disappointed. "Honey," Nancy said, approaching cautiously. "What's your name? Maybe we should call someone to come get you." Her voice was kind, but Lily recognized the implication. "Lily," she answered, mind racing. "Lily Mason, but my mom will be back any minute. She needed to see someone nearby." Nancy's forehead creased with doubt. "It's getting pretty late, sweetie. Is there someone else we can call? Your daddy, maybe? Or grandparents?" Lily shook her head, the weight of her situation crushing down. "No, ma'am, just my mom." The truth was, there was nobody else. Her father, a former soldier who taught her how to tie knots and start fires, had disappeared 3 years ago. Her mother had cut ties with her own parents long before Lily was born. The bell above the door jingled, and Lily's heart surged with hope. But it was just another customer, a young man in a business suit who headed straight for the coffee machine. "Well, I'm going to need to call someone if she doesn't show up soon," Nancy said softly, returning to the counter. "Can't have a young girl waiting here all night." Lily nodded, but panic flared inside her. She knew what would happen if Nancy called the authorities. She'd heard her mother's frightened whispers about social services, about children being taken away, about foster homes where terrible things happened. Her mother might have abandoned her, but Lily wasn't about to let herself be taken by strangers. While Nancy was busy with the businessman, Lily quietly gathered her backpack. The $20 bill was still clutched in her hand, her only financial resource in the world now. She inched toward the side door marked "Emergency Exit Only," calculating the risk. When a delivery truck pulled up outside, momentarily distracting both Nancy and the customer, Lily slipped through the door and into the evening air. The alarm blared behind her, But Lily was already running, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sleet had transformed into heavy snow, fat flakes swirling in the bitter wind. She darted behind the building, across the parking lot, and into the small wooded area that separated the gas station from a fast food restaurant. Crouching behind a dumpster, she waited, listening to the confused voices at the gas station gradually fade. As night fully descended, the November air bit through her thin jacket, a harsh reminder of how unprepared she was for what lay ahead. But Lily had always been resourceful by necessity when living with her unpredictable mother. She'd learned to cook simple meals by age 7, to budget their meager resources by 9, to lie convincingly to landlords and bill collectors by 10. Now at 11, she would need to draw on every survival skill she possessed. As she huddled behind the dumpster, Lily pulled her knees to her chest, fighting back tears. She wouldn't cry. Crying wouldn't bring her mother back, wouldn't put a roof over her head, wouldn't fill her growling stomach. Instead, she opened her backpack and took inventory. One change of clothes, her toothbrush, the wilderness book, the photo album, her school lunch from earlier that she hadn't finished, half a sandwich and an apple, a small flashlight, and a near-empty water bottle. Not much to build a life on, but it would have to do. The sounds of the interstate provided a constant backdrop. Trucks rumbling, cars whooshing by, occasional horns blaring. Lily peered around the dumpster at the fast food restaurant. Its lights glowed warm and inviting in the darkness, and the smell of grease and salt made her stomach clench painfully. Cautiously, she crept toward the building, keeping to the shadows as snowflakes clung to her hair and eyelashes. Behind the restaurant, employees occasionally emerged to dump trash, offering her glimpses of the kitchen inside. Lily waited patiently, watching the routine of the workers, noticing when they became busy and distracted. During one such rush, she slipped around to the front and entered, trying to look like any normal child with parents somewhere nearby. She headed straight for the condiment station, grabbing napkins and ketchup packets, then casually picked up a discarded tray with half-eaten fries and a partially consumed soda. Taking it to an empty booth, she quickly devoured the cold fries and drained the watered-down cola, her first meal as a homeless child. A rustling sound startled her as she finished the last fry. Lily froze, eyes darting to the source of the noise. Under the adjacent table, a scrawny dog with patchy fur was nosing through a discarded hamburger wrapper. The animal looked up, meeting her gaze with wary intelligence. One ear was torn, giving it a rakish, unbalanced appearance. Lily slowly reached down, offering her palm for the dog to sniff. "Hey there," she whispered. The dog hesitated, clearly accustomed to being chased away rather than welcomed. Its ribs showed through its dirty coat, another survivor living on the margins. "I won't hurt you," Lily said softly, breaking off a bit of her sandwich and holding it out. The dog inched forward, hunger overcoming caution, and gently took the offered food. As it ate, Lily noticed it wore no collar, just like she now wore no home. "We're both on our own, huh?" she murmured, offering another morsel. The dog accepted it, then surprised her by sitting down beside her, its body warm against her leg under the table. When a manager started looking suspiciously in their direction, Lily gathered her backpack and slipped out the side door, the dog following close behind. Together, they retreated to the wooded area behind the restaurants and gas stations that clustered around the interstate exit. "You need a name," Lily told the dog as they settled beneath a large pine tree, its needles providing some insulation from the snow-covered ground. "How about Scout? You look like you're good at finding things." The dog tilted his head, his one good ear perking up at the sound of his new name. He circled 3 times before lying down beside her, his body a welcome source of warmth in the frigid night. Despite the relative safety of their hiding place, Lily barely slept, startling awake at every unfamiliar sound. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, the distant wail of a police siren that sent her heart racing with fear of being discovered. By dawn, her resolve had crystallized. She couldn't stay here, so close to where her mother had abandoned her. Sooner or later, someone would find her and call the authorities. She needed to get away, to find somewhere she could survive on her own terms. Lily had overheard 2 truck drivers at the restaurant talking about the Rocky Mountains, about cabins and hunting lodges where people could disappear if they had a mind to. Something had stirred within her at those words. Not just hope, but direction. "We're heading to the mountains, Scout," she told the dog, who had remained faithfully by her side throughout the night. Somewhere no one will look for us. With the $20 clutched tightly in her pocket and her new companion at her heels, Lily began walking, following the interstate but keeping to the tree line to avoid being seen. The snow had accumulated several inches overnight, making each step a challenge. She had no map, no compass, just an instinctual pull toward the distant mountain ridges visible on the horizon, and the vague knowledge that heading west would take her deeper into the mountains. The journey was arduous for an 11-year-old girl and a half-starved dog. They walked for hours each day, rested in hidden spots, and survived on whatever food Lily could scavenge or purchase with her dwindling funds. She became adept at dumpster diving behind restaurants, learning which establishments threw away the most edible food and at what times. Scout proved invaluable, his nose leading them to discarded meals and his instincts warning of approaching strangers. Lily carefully rationed her $20, spending it only when absolutely necessary. A bottle of water on a particularly cold day, a package of jerky when they'd found no food for 2 days, a cheap pair of gloves at a dollar store when her fingers grew numb with cold. To avoid suspicion, she developed a repertoire of stories for the rare instances when adults questioned her presence. "My dad's fishing up ahead," she'd say near a stream. "My mom's waiting in the car," she'd explain when purchasing supplies. She became skilled at appearing unremarkable. Just another kid on an errand, nothing to notice or remember. One particularly brutal morning, as they trudged through 6 inches of fresh snow, Scout suddenly stopped, hackles raised. Lily followed his gaze and spotted movement in the trees ahead, a pack of lean, hungry-looking wolves. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "If you ever meet a predator, don't run. Make yourself look big. Don't show fear." Slowly, Lily raised her arms above her head, made her jacket bulge out, and began backing away. The wolves observed with calculated interest, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Scout growled low in his throat, placing himself between Lily and the threat despite being vastly outmatched. For several heart-stopping moments, girl and wolves regarded each other, fellow survivors in a harsh winter landscape. Then, as if deciding she wasn't worth the effort, the pack turned and disappeared into the trees. Lily's knees buckled as relief flooded through her. She hugged Scout tightly, burying her face in his rough fur. "You saved me. I won't forget that." That night, they found shelter in an abandoned shed, its roof partially collapsed under the weight of snow, but still offering protection from the biting wind. Using techniques from her wilderness book, Lily created a small, controlled fire in a rusted metal bucket. As warmth slowly filled their temporary sanctuary, she shared the last of the jerky with Scout. "Survival isn't just about being strong," she told him, recalling her father's words. "It's about being smarter than whatever's trying to kill you." Right now, that's the cold. 2 weeks into their journey, having made slow but steady progress toward the mountains, Lily and Scout encountered their first significant human connection since the gas station. At a small truck stop nestled at the foot of the first real mountain ridge, Lily was searching for discarded food when she heard a kindly voice. "You look like you could use a hot meal, young lady." Lily spun around instinctively, prepared to flee, but stopped when she saw the speaker. An elderly woman with silver hair tied in a neat bun, her face weathered but kind. She wore a nurse's scrubs under a heavy coat and sat alone at a picnic table with a thermos and sandwich. "I'm fine, ma'am," Lily replied automatically, her guard up. "Just waiting for my dad." The woman's eyes, sharp despite her age, took in Lily's dirty clothes, tangled hair, and the protective way Scout hovered at her side. She didn't call Lily on the obvious lie. "I'm Sarah Thompson," she said instead, opening a small cooler beside her. "I've packed too much food for my drive. Would your dog like a piece of this ham sandwich? And perhaps you could help me finish these cookies?" Lily hesitated, hunger warring with caution. Sarah made no move to approach or to call anyone, simply waiting with patient kindness. "I'm Lily," she finally said, taking a tentative step forward. "And this is Scout." "Well, Lily and Scout, I'm pleased to meet you both." Sarah smiled, breaking her sandwich in half and placing part on a napkin for the dog, who looked to Lily for permission. "It's okay," Lily whispered, and Scout gently took the offering, gulping it down in seconds. As Lily cautiously sat across from Sarah and accepted a cookie, The woman spoke casually, asking no probing questions about why a young girl was alone at a truck stop. Instead, she shared stories of her own travels, of her years as an army nurse, of the mountains they were both facing. "I spent 20 years patching up soldiers," Sarah said, pouring hot chocolate from her thermos into a spare cup for Lily. "Now I work at the VA hospital over in Asheville, helping veterans heal in different ways." Lily sipped the rich, warm drink, feeling it spread heat through her cold body. "Is that far from here?" "About 2 hours that way," Sarah gestured toward the mountains. "Deep in those hills. Beautiful country, though the winters can be harsh if you're not prepared." Something in her tone made Lily wonder if the warning was intentional. Sarah continued, "I grew up in these mountains. They can be both generous and cruel. They provide shelter, food, water, everything you need to survive, but they demand respect and knowledge in return." As they talked, Sarah casually imparted wisdom that seemed oddly specific to Lily's situation. Which plants were safe to eat, how to find clean water, basic first aid for cuts and sprains. When Scout's limping caught her attention, Sarah examined the dog with a professional efficiency, sharing tips for using willow bark as a natural anti-inflammatory. "The key to survival isn't strength," Sarah said as they finished their impromptu meal. "It's adaptability, learning from every situation, storing away knowledge like a squirrel stores nuts for winter." When it was time for Sarah to continue her journey, she pressed a small first aid kit and a packet of dried food into Lily's hands. "For emergencies," she said simply. "Everyone needs help sometimes, Lily. There's no shame in that." Then with one last piece of advice, socks are more important than shoes in the mountains. Keep your feet dry above all else. Sarah departed, leaving Lily with a full stomach, practical knowledge, and the first genuine human connection she'd experienced since being abandoned. That night, as Lily and Scout sheltered beneath a rocky overhang with a small fire for warmth, she opened her backpack and carefully added Sarah's gifts to her meager supplies. For the first time since leaving the gas station, Lily allowed herself to cry, not from despair, but from the simple kindness of a stranger who had seen her need and responded with humanity rather than judgment. "We'll make it, Scout," she whispered, burying her face in the dog's fur. "We'll find somewhere to belong." The mountains loomed closer each day as Lily and Scout continued their journey, hitchhiking occasionally with kindly truckers who asked few questions, walking when necessary, always moving westward into increasingly rugged terrain. Lily's feet toughened, her body growing leaner but stronger. Scout's coat began to fill out as regular meals, however humble, provided steady nutrition. 2 months after being abandoned, having traveled over 200 miles from that fateful gas station, Lily stood at the edge of a dense forest high in the Rocky Mountains. The December air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and fallen snow. The distant sounds of civilization, cars, machinery, human voices, had faded, replaced by wind through trees and the occasional call of a bird. "This feels right, Scout," Lily said, scratching behind her companion's torn ear. The dog wagged his tail in agreement, already nosing at the forest floor, exploring their new environment. For days, they wandered deeper into the wilderness, Lily striving to use the knowledge gleaned from her wilderness book and Sarah's advice. She learned to identify cardinal directions using the sun, to recognize edible plants beneath the snow, to find natural shelters. When they came across a clear mountain stream, partially frozen but still flowing beneath, Lily followed it upstream instinctively, understanding that water was the key to survival. On the 5th day, as heavy snow fell around them, the stream led them to a small clearing. And there, partially hidden by overgrown bushes and young trees, stood a weathered cabin. Its roof sagged dangerously on one side, windows gaped like hungry mouths, and the porch had partially collapsed. But to Lily's eyes, it was nothing short of miraculous. "Look, Scout," she breathed, hardly daring to hope. A home? Approaching cautiously, Lily circled the structure, checking for signs of recent habitation. Cobwebs draped the windows. Snow had drifted against the door, undisturbed by footprints, suggesting no human had visited in many seasons. Working up her courage, she pushed open the creaking door and peered inside. The cabin's interior was simple. One main room with a stone fireplace, a crude wooden table, 2 chairs, and shelves built into the walls. A ladder led to a small loft where a dusty mattress lay. Mouse droppings littered the floor, and a family of squirrels had clearly nested in one corner, scattering as they entered. But the structure itself appeared sound, despite the sagging roof. "It needs work," Lily told Scout, who was sniffing every corner with great interest. "But it's ours now. Our sanctuary." That first night in the cabin was both triumphant and terrifying. As darkness fell, the forest came alive with unfamiliar sounds. The hoot of owls, the distant howl of what might have been a coyote, the rustling of creatures in the underbrush. The old cabin creaked and settled, its timbers adjusting to their new inhabitants after years of abandonment. Lily fashioned a makeshift bed in the corner, farthest from the damaged roof, using fallen pine boughs for insulation against the cold floor, and her one spare set of clothes as a pillow. Scout curled against her side, his warmth and steady presence a comfort in the unfamiliar darkness. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by every unusual sound and the constant worry of discovery. But underneath the fear lay a seed of something Lily hadn't felt in years: hope. For the first time in her young life, she had a place that was truly hers, a sanctuary where no one could take her away, separate her from Scout, or force her into a system she feared. Dawn brought clarity and purpose. Lily explored the cabin and its surroundings more thoroughly, making mental inventories and prioritizing needs. The most urgent issue was the damaged roof. With winter deepening, shelter from snow and cold was critical. Near the cabin, she discovered a small tool shed containing basic implements: a rusty hammer, an axe with a worn handle, nails of various sizes, and a handsaw. "Someone lived here once," Lily told Scout, as she examined an old tin box containing fishing hooks and line. "Someone who knew how to survive out here." Over the next days, Lily began the daunting task of making the cabin habitable. She cleared out debris and animal nests, swept the floor with a crude broom fashioned from pine branches, and patched the worst holes in the walls with moss and mud. The roof presented the greatest challenge. She was too small and inexperienced to attempt a proper repair, but she managed to cover the largest holes with fallen branches and salvaged sheets of metal roofing she found behind the shed. Each improvement, however small, filled her with quiet pride. Each challenge overcome was a victory against the world that had abandoned her. And through it all, Scout remained her constant companion, sometimes helping by dragging branches or alerting her to approaching animals, sometimes simply offering the comfort of his presence when tasks seemed overwhelming. While searching through cabinets, Lily found a stack of notebooks bound in leather, their pages filled with elegant, faded handwriting. "Property of Eleanor Wright, RN," read the inscription on the first page. The journals detailed Eleanor's life in the cabin, her decision to retreat to the mountains after serving as a field nurse in some unnamed war, her struggle to adapt to wilderness living, her eventual peace found in solitude. "These mountains don't care about your past," one entry read. "They don't judge or pity. They simply present challenges, and either you overcome them or you don't. There's honesty in that simplicity I never found among people." Lily devoured the journals by firelight, finding in Eleanor's words both practical advice and spiritual comfort. This woman had come to the mountains broken, just as Lily had. She had faced the same challenges: cold, hunger, isolation, and had not merely survived, but found purpose. In another journal, Eleanor wrote about rumors of military supplies hidden somewhere in these mountains during the war. Some of the veterans who came through seeking peace spoke of a cache of weapons, medical supplies, and valuable equipment abandoned when a transport operation went wrong. "I've never searched for it myself. I came here to escape war, not to find its remnants. But on cold nights, I sometimes wonder about the treasures these mountains might hold." 2 weeks into their residence at the cabin, the first real test of their survival skills arrived with a fierce winter storm. The wind howled through the mountain passes, driving snow against the cabin walls and finding every weakness in Lily's makeshift repairs. The temperature dropped sharply as night fell, and Lily huddled with Scout in the corner, wrapped in the only blanket she'd found in the cabin, a moth-eaten wool throw that smelled of mildew but provided precious warmth. Snow drifted steadily from the damaged roof, forming piles on the wooden floor. The wind found every crack and crevice, sending icy drafts swirling through the cabin. Outside, tree branches cracked under the weight of wet snow, each snap sounding like a gunshot in the dark forest. As the night wore on, the temperature continued to fall, and Lily's teeth chattered uncontrollably. Scout pressed closer, sharing his body heat, but it wasn't enough. The reality of their situation struck Lily with terrifying clarity. They could freeze to death in this cabin, their bodies undiscovered until spring thawed the mountain. With trembling hands, Lily gathered the driest sticks and pine needles she could find, piling them in the stone fireplace. Using matches from Sarah's emergency kit, she attempted to start a fire, but the damp wood sputtered and smoked, refusing to catch properly. "Please," she begged, blowing gently on the feeble spark. "Please." On her third attempt, a small flame flickered to life, struggling against the wetness of the wood. Lily fed it carefully, adding larger sticks only when the smaller ones had dried it enough to burn consistently. Gradually, the fire grew, casting wavering light and precious heat into the dark cabin. Scout lay as close to the hearth as safety allowed, his fur steaming slightly as it dried. Lily joined him, extending her numb hands toward the warmth, feeling life and hope returning with each beat of her heart. The fire burned through the night, consuming most of their gathered wood. Lily woke frequently to add fuel, unwilling to let their salvation die. By morning, the storm had intensified. Nearly 2 feet of snow blanketed the forest floor, weighing down branches and transforming the landscape into a white wilderness. Standing in the doorway, surveying their snowbound sanctuary, Lily felt something shift inside her. This night had changed her, forced her to confront the harsh realities of survival and overcome them. The fragile child who had fled a gas station months ago was being forged into something stronger, something resilient. "We survived our first test," she told Scout, who pranced excitedly in the fresh snow, his paw prints marking their territory. "But there will be more. We need to be ready." The close call with the storm instilled a new urgency in Lily's preparations. She began to think beyond immediate shelter to longer-term survival. Using knowledge from Eleanor's journals and her wilderness book, she established priorities. Strengthen the cabin's defenses against weather, secure reliable food sources, create emergency plans for illness or injury. A tremendous crack shattered the morning stillness. Lily and Scout rushed outside to see an enormous pine tree had snapped under the weight of the snow, crashing directly onto the cabin's roof. Wood splintered, and the already compromised structure groaned ominously. A gaping hole now exposed the interior to the elements, and snow poured in like white sand through an hourglass. "No," Lily cried out, her heart sinking. All her work, all her hope, crushed in an instant by the indifferent force of nature. But there was no time for despair. Temperatures would plummet again at nightfall, and without shelter, they wouldn't survive. Thinking quickly, Lily gathered her most essential supplies: matches, blanket, Eleanor's journals, her wilderness book, the remaining food, and stuffed them into her backpack. "Come on, Scout. We need to fix this now." Using the tools from the shed, Lily began the seemingly impossible task of repairing a roof far beyond her reach. She dragged fallen branches to the side of the cabin, creating a makeshift ladder to access the damage. Her hands, exposed to the biting cold as she worked, grew numb and clumsy. Twice she slipped on the icy wood, barely catching herself before falling. "The future exists only for those willing to fight for it," Eleanor had written in one journal entry. "The mountain doesn't promise tomorrow. It only provides opportunity for those strong enough to seize it." Lily worked through the day, hauling salvaged metal sheets from the shed, securing them over the hole with nails driven through pre-drilled holes. Each movement was agony in the cold, but she persisted, driven by the certainty that failure meant death. Scout remained below, barking encouragement and warning when she ventured too close to the roof's edge. By late afternoon, with daylight fading and her strength nearly gone, Lily had managed to cover the worst of the damage. The repair was crude and temporary, but it would keep out most of the snow and wind, enough perhaps to survive another night. As she descended her makeshift ladder, fingers bleeding from countless small cuts and muscles trembling with exhaustion, Lily's foot slipped on an icy rung. She fell, tumbling through air suddenly thick with panic, landing with a sickening thud in a deep snowdrift beside the cabin. For a moment she lay still, the wind knocked from her lungs, staring up at the darkening sky swirling with fresh snowflakes. Scout rushed to her side, whining anxiously, licking her face. The fall could have been fatal. A broken neck, a cracked skull, but the snow had cushioned her landing. Another small mercy in a world that offered few. When Lily finally managed to stand, brushing snow from her clothes with shaking hands, she noticed something half buried where her fall had displaced the drift, a dark rectangular object protruding from beneath the cabin's foundation. Curious despite her exhaustion, she knelt and brushed away more snow, revealing an old metal box, its surface pitted with rust, but its military-style latches still intact. Dragging it from its hiding place with Scout's curious assistance, Lily carried the heavy box inside the cabin. In the fading light, she pried open the stiff latches, lifting the lid to reveal contents that momentarily robbed her of breath. An old revolver wrapped in oiled cloth, boxes of ammunition, a folded map marked with strange symbols, and a small leather pouch containing gold coins. Eleanor's rumored military supplies? Lily wondered, examining the revolver with cautious respect, remembering her father's strict lessons about firearm safety. Or something else entirely? As night fell outside and temperatures plummeted once more, Lily built another fire in the hearth, stronger this time with properly dried wood she'd stored inside. By its flickering light, she unfolded the map, tracing the faded lines and markings that depicted the surrounding mountain terrain. Several locations had been marked with X's, and handwritten notes in the margins provided cryptic clues. Second Ridge cache intact, main depot compromised, medical supplies relocated to northern site. Eleanor had written about veterans hiding supplies in these mountains, but this suggested something more organized, more deliberate. Not just abandoned equipment, but intentional caches, perhaps for some purpose Lily couldn't yet comprehend. Studying the map by firelight, with Scout's warm presence beside phone and the repaired cabin holding back the winter's fury, Lily felt a strange sense of destiny. She had come to these mountains seeking only survival, a place to hide from a world that had cast her aside. Instead, she had stumbled upon mystery and possibility, a new path forward that extended beyond mere existence. The cabin was not merely shelter now, it was the beginning of something, a base from which to explore the secrets marked on the map, a home in which to grow stronger, wiser, more capable, a sanctuary earned through courage and persistence. "I think we were meant to find this place, Scout," Lily whispered, her fingers tracing the map's mysterious markings. "And I think it has more to show us." Eleanor was right. The mountains don't just take. If you're strong enough, they give as well. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the cabin's walls, a small fire burned steadily, its light reflecting in the eyes of a child no longer merely surviving, but beginning to live with purpose. The first chapter of her mountain life had been written, in struggle, in near disaster, and ultimately in triumph. What would follow remained unclear, but for the first time since watching her mother walk away, Lily faced the future not with fear, but with determination. The mountain had tested her first test, and she had passed. Whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms, in this place she had claimed through courage and will, her sanctuary in the snow. Winter settled into the mountains with ruthless intention. Days shortened, temperatures plummeted, and snow accumulated in drifts taller than Lily herself. Each morning brought fresh challenges: frozen water buckets, dwindling firewood, game trails buried beneath impassable snow. But Eleanor Wright's journals became Lily's lifeline, filled with practical wisdom earned through years of mountain solitude. The cabin itself revealed its secrets gradually, teaching Lily which floorboards creaked warnings of structural weakness, which corners sheltered from drafts during bitter nights, which windows caught precious morning sunlight to warm the interior. Foraging expeditions with Scout lengthened as resources grew scarce. Lily learned to identify wildlife from their tracks, deer paths that might lead to edible vegetation, rabbit warrens where she could set snares, areas frequented by predators to avoid. Eleanor's detailed drawings of winter plants proved invaluable, showing which pine needles could make vitamin-rich tea, which tree bark contained inner layers that could be dried and ground into emergency flour. Nothing was wasted, every discovery celebrated as victory against the elements. On a crystalline January morning, with the forest transformed into a diamond-studded wonderland by yesterday's ice storm, Lily ventured beyond their usual territory. The map found with the revolver showed several marked locations within hiking distance, caches that might contain supplies to ease their winter hardship. Scout bounded ahead, his once gaunt body now muscled and energetic, dark fur standing in sharp contrast against the pristine snow. His sudden halt and low growl sent an instant warning. Fresh footprints crossed their path, human footprints, large and purposeful, heading directly toward their cabin. Someone's tracking us. Lily's pulse quickened as she examined the impressions. Not a random hiker lost on the mountain, but deliberate steps following their frequent routes from the cabin. The prints were less than an hour old, snow still occasionally crumbling into the depressions as she studied them. "We need to get back, Scout. Now." They circled wide, approaching the cabin from the unexpected direction of the stream, moving silently as Lily had learned from Eleanor's tactical advice about avoiding predators. From the shelter of dense pines, they observed their sanctuary. Nothing seemed disturbed. No stranger waited on the porch or visible through windows. But the footprints continued right to their door, circled the perimeter, then headed northward up the ridge. Lily retreated to the cabin, heart pounding against her ribs. Someone knew they were here, had examined their home, perhaps planned to return. The revolver lay wrapped in its oiled cloth beneath her bed, a final defense she'd hoped never to need. With trembling hands, she unwrapped it, checking the cylinder as her father had once taught her. 5 bullets. Would they be enough if the stranger returned with malicious intent? For 3 days, Lily maintained constant vigilance. She gathered supplies for potential escape, packed emergency provisions in her backpack, slept only in fitful bursts with scouts standing guard. On the 4th morning, while melting snow for drinking water, a knock shattered the silence. Scout's warning growl gave her seconds to position herself defensively, revolver hidden behind her back as she faced the door. Through the window, she glimpsed a tall figure standing on the porch, broad-shouldered and imposing even through layers of winter clothing. Another knock, more insistent. "I know you're in there. I've seen the smoke from your chimney for weeks now." The voice carried authority, deep, weathered, but not immediately threatening. Lily remained frozen, calculating odds of escape through the back window versus confrontation. This was Eleanor Wright's cabin. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Just want to know who's taken up residence in my friend's home." Eleanor's friend? The journals mentioned few visitors beyond occasional veterans seeking wilderness therapy. Could this stranger truly have known the cabin's former occupant? Or was this a ploy to gain entrance? Lily cracked the door 2 inches, enough to speak but still shielded by solid wood, Scout positioned protectively at her side. "I found it abandoned. I haven't stolen anything." The man's face registered visible shock as he took in the young girl rather than the adult he'd clearly expected. He appeared to be in his early 60s, with salt and pepper beard and penetrating blue eyes beneath a weathered brow. Deep lines etched his face, the permanent markings of someone who'd seen too much hardship too young. He wore practical wilderness gear, heavy canvas pants, multiple layers topped by a down-filled jacket, snowshoes strapped to insulated boots. "You're just a kid." His voice softened slightly, disbelief evident. "How long have you been up here alone?" "Since December. We're doing fine." Lily kept her tone firm, refusing to show weakness or fear. The man's gaze shifted to Scout, noting the protective stance and torn ear. "We, huh? At least you've got good company. Name's Jackson Hayes. I live about 2 miles north over that ridge. Known Eleanor for 20 years before her cancer took her to Asheville." The details matched Eleanor's journals, lending credibility to his claim. Still, Lily maintained her guard, hand steady on the hidden revolver. "What do you want?" Jackson's expression hardened, professional assessment replacing initial surprise. "Winter's barely started, girl. You've managed so far, but February brings storms that'll test every repair on this old place. Temperatures that'll freeze you solid if your fire dies. I've been watching, trying to figure out who moved in. Expected squatters, maybe drug runners. Not this." The admission of surveillance raised Lily's hackles. "You've been spying on us?" Ensuring Eleanor's property wasn't being misused. Jackson's gaze swept past her to the cabin interior, cataloging her improvements and adaptations. "But clearly you're not destructive, just desperate. Where are your parents?" The question collapsed the brief confidence Lily had mustered. Her silence answered more eloquently than words could have. Jackson sighed, a sound heavy with recognition rather than judgment. "Look, I'm not calling authorities. Not my business why you're here instead of wherever you're supposed to be. But these mountains kill the unprepared. Even with that book I've seen you carrying. Lily's defensive posture softened slightly, curiosity overcoming caution. How do you know about my book? Watched you reading by the fire through the east window. Military-grade binoculars. Old habits. He gestured vaguely toward his own cabin across the ridge. I respect your independence. Respect anyone who survives a month up here alone, but there are things that book won't teach you, things Eleanor knew that kept her alive for decades. The offer hung implicit between them, surrounded by swirling snow and the whisper of pine branches heavy with winter's burden. Lily assessed the stranger, his steady stance, the calloused hands suggesting practical capability, the watchful eyes that missed nothing. She recognized something in his demeanor, a focused intensity her father had possessed. Military bearing, her mother had called it. I'm Lily, Lily Mason. This is Scout. She pushed the door open wider, a calculated risk, but one her instincts supported. Would you like to come in? Their unusual alliance began tentatively. Jackson visited every few days, bringing small offerings, properly cured firewood that burned hotter than the damp logs Lily had gathered, a tin of coffee that became precious luxury during cold mornings, heavy wool socks that finally kept her feet warm through the night. Each visit included practical instruction, how to reinforce the cabin's vulnerabilities against accumulating snow load, efficient methods for setting multiple snares to improve hunting success, techniques for preserving meat without electricity. Jackson revealed little about himself beyond the essential: Vietnam-era special forces, stationed primarily in the highlands. Afterwards, civilian life held little appeal. Too many people, too much noise, too many questions from those who couldn't understand what they hadn't experienced. The mountains offered silence, purpose, control over his environment without the complications of social expectations. Eleanor had been similar, a combat nurse who'd seen too much death to reintegrate smoothly into peacetime medical practice. Your situations were different, Jackson explained during a lesson on reading weather patterns from cloud formations. But the principle's the same. Sometimes the world doesn't fit right anymore, so you find a place that does. These mountains don't ask questions. They just set terms. Respect them or die. Simple contract. Lily absorbed everything Jackson taught, adding his practical knowledge to Eleanor's written wisdom. She noticed his methods often involved military precision, systematic approaches to problems, backup plans for every contingency, constant awareness of surroundings. His hands sometimes trembled when unexpected noises broke the silence, and distant gazes occasionally claimed him mid-sentence, mind pulled elsewhere by triggers Lily couldn't perceive. On a particularly brutal February morning, with temperatures hovering at 20 below zero, Jackson arrived at the cabin looking more severe than usual. Been meaning to ask something important. Anyone know you're here? Anyone who might come looking? Lily shook her head, the painful truth requiring no elaboration. My mom left me at a gas station back in November. $20 and a promise to return in 20 minutes. She never came back. Jackson's weathered face remained impassive, but his eyes reflected comprehension of abandonment's particular sting. He'd seen it in fellow soldiers left behind by governments, families, their own minds. And what's your plan for spring? Rangers patrol these forests once snow melts. Hikers start appearing. Questions get asked about young girls living alone in abandoned cabins. The question had haunted Lily's quiet moments. Eleanor's journals detailed methods for avoiding unwanted attention, but sustaining complete isolation indefinitely seemed impossible. People find what they're looking for, and your situation would interest many: social services, police, maybe whoever you ran from. I didn't run from anyone, I just couldn't go into the system. Lily's voice hardened with conviction born from her mother's fearful warnings. I won't be taken away. Jackson nodded, understanding deeper than sympathy in his expression. Every warrior chooses their battlefield. You've chosen yours. But smart fighters use every advantage, including deception. We need to create your cover story. The strategy developed gradually. Jackson had lived semi-legally on the mountain for decades, maintaining minimal but essential connections with civilization. He had contacts, a lawyer who helped veterans navigate bureaucratic labyrinths, a doctor who asked few questions, a network of former military who understood the need for privacy. Through careful maneuvers, documentation began materializing. Guardian papers showing Jackson Hayes as Lily Mason's grandfather, homeschooling records to explain her education situation, even medical history fabricated to withstand casual scrutiny. The mountains teach preparation in all things. Jackson spread the papers across Lily's table, each document reinforcing their manufactured relationship. Spring brings outsiders. If questioned, you're my granddaughter, orphaned when your parents, my son and his wife, died in a car accident last year. You've lived with me since, finding healing through wilderness living and homeschooling. Memorize these details. Our survival depends on consistency. Their strategy session was interrupted by Scout's alert bark, not as warning of danger, but excitement indicating familiar approach. Jackson tensed instinctively, hand moving toward the knife at his belt, before Lily's reassuring gesture stopped him. That's probably Tommy. He comes around sometimes. The young boy appeared in the doorway, cheeks flushed with cold beneath a too large knitted cap. 9 years old and fearless, Tommy was the son of a hunting family whose cabin lay several miles east. He'd discovered Lily while tracking deer and immediately adopted her as the most interesting person on the mountain, appearing regularly with questions, observations, and occasional treats from his mother's kitchen. Tommy's eyes widened at finding Jackson in Lily's cabin, recognition sparking immediately. Mr. Hayes, you know each other? The grown-ups don't know I come here. They think I'm just exploring. Jackson's demeanor transformed subtly, the hardened edge softening into something Lily hadn't witnessed before. Tommy, right? Met your father last hunting season when he got turned around in the North Valley. Good man, respects the forest. The unexpected connection altered the dynamic instantly. Tommy became their unwitting ambassador to the outside world, bringing information from the scattered mountain community while carrying back carefully crafted mentions of Lily and her grandfather. The deception spread organically through Tommy's innocent conversations, establishing their cover story before spring necessitated direct interactions with others. Through February's deepening cold, Jackson's lessons intensified. He approached Lily's education with military thoroughness, physical skills, tactical thinking, psychological resilience. Each day brought new challenges designed to strengthen her capabilities beyond mere survival toward genuine mountain proficiency. The revolver she'd discovered became central to one set of lessons, Jackson's expertise transforming her tentative handling into confident marksmanship. Guns aren't toys or magic wands. Jackson positioned her hands correctly, adjusting her stance with professional precision. They're tools with one purpose. If you're pointing this at something, you've already decided that thing needs to die. No middle ground. That decision should never come easily, but once made, you can't hesitate. Understand? The shooting lessons took place far from the cabins, deep in a ravine where snow-covered banks absorbed sound. Jackson shared stories as they practiced, controlled glimpses into his military past that contextualized his skills without glorifying their acquisition. He'd been a sniper in Vietnam, tasked with eliminating high-value targets behind enemy lines. The precision and patience required had shaped him permanently, creating mental patterns that civilian life couldn't accommodate. I watched through a scope for 3 days without moving, waiting for a North Vietnamese colonel to appear at his headquarters. Lily listened, recognizing the confession's weight, experiences rarely shared with anyone, certainly not with civilians who couldn't comprehend such realities. My team was ambushed during extraction. 6 men entered that valley, 2 came out. I carried my spotter 15 miles with a bullet in my own leg before reaching friendly forces. The stories weren't meant to impress, but to explain why he lived alone, why ordinary society felt intolerable, why he understood her need for sanctuary when most adults would have immediately contacted authorities. Trauma created bonds that transcended conventional relationships, connecting the abandoned child and the haunted veteran through shared recognition of the world's capacity for cruelty. As their unusual partnership deepened, Lily began visiting Jackson's cabin, a larger, more established structure built with military precision and maintained with obsessive care. Unlike Eleanor's artistic wilderness refuge, Jackson's home resembled a tactical outpost. Reinforced windows offered defensive positions, Multiple exit routes provided escape options, and carefully positioned mirrors eliminated blind spots. The interior walls displayed maps marked with resource caches, potential danger zones, and patrol schedules for forest rangers. Most revealing was his war room, a small section where military memorabilia hung in solemn display. Medals and shadow boxes, including a silver star and multiple purple hearts. Photographs of young men in jungle fatigues, their faces bearing the particular intensity of those existing under constant threat. A folded American flag in a triangle case. And surprisingly, a photograph of a much younger Jackson standing beside Eleanor Wright, both in military uniforms outside a field hospital. Their expressions showing the peculiar mix of exhaustion and determination unique to combat zones. You knew her during the war. Lily studied the photograph, connecting pieces of both their stories. Eleanor's journals mentioned a soldier she'd treated, someone special who'd been separated by deployment reassignments. Jackson touched the photo's edge with uncharacteristic gentleness, took shrapnel during an operation near the DMZ. Eleanor was the nurse who dug 6 pieces of metal out of my back without anesthesia. We had 3 weeks together before my team relocated. War creates intense connections quickly. When any moment might be your last, you don't waste time with small talk. Why didn't you find her after? Lily's question carried the innocent directness of youth, cutting through adult complications to the essential puzzle. We tried. Jackson's voice held decades of regret, but it was chaos after the fall of Saigon. Records lost, people scattered. By the time I tracked her to these mountains years later, we'd both changed too fundamentally. Some doors, once closed, can't reopen. But we found a different connection. Fellow survivors who understood each other's scars without explanation. Sometimes that's enough. The revelation of Jackson and Eleanor's shared history transformed Lily's understanding of both. The journals she'd been studying took on deeper significance. Not just wilderness guidance, but the philosophy of someone who'd experienced extraordinary trauma and found healing in deliberate isolation. Jackson's protective interest in Eleanor's cabin suddenly made sense beyond simple friendship. They had been each other's witnesses, carrying shared memories no one else could validate. A new presence interrupted their tentative community in early March, when the first signs of thaw softened the snow's crust under strengthening sun. Jackson arrived at Lily's cabin with unusual urgency, expression grim beneath his winter hat. Got company on the mountain, logging company scouts, marking trees for potential harvest. Need you to stay out of sight for a few days. The warning proved prescient. The following morning, Lily observed 3 men in bright jackets moving through the forest below her cabin, carrying equipment and stopping frequently to examine particular trees. Through borrowed binoculars, she read the logo emblazoned on their parkas, Maxwell Timber Enterprises. Jackson appeared silently beside her at the window, his approach soundless despite the creaking cabin floor, a remnant of combat skills never forgotten. Maxwell Blackwood. His voice carried uncharacteristic emotion, controlled hatred rather than his usual detached analysis. He's been trying to get logging rights to these mountains for years, claims it's about fire management and forest health. Really about ancient hardwoods worth thousands each. Lily watched the men methodically documenting the forest. Is that bad for us? Jackson's laugh held no humor. Bad for everyone. These forests shelter hundreds of species, clean the watershed for 3 counties downstream, and they're habitat for people like us. Those who need space civilization can't provide. Maxwell doesn't care, just sees dollar signs in century-old trees. The survey crew worked their way gradually toward the cabin, stopping just within the tree line at its edge. Through the binoculars, Lily observed their leader, a younger man with an officious manner, constantly checking documents against their findings. When he glanced toward the cabin, she ducked instinctively below the windowsill. That's Blackwood's son, Jackson whispered, remaining motionless beside the window frame. James. Harvard business degree and daddy's ambition without the charm to disguise it. Been trying to expand operations into protected areas, looking for loopholes in conservation legislation. Why do you know so much about them? Lily's question emerged from growing suspicion about Jackson's intense reaction. Know your enemy, first rule of survival. Jackson's focus remained on the survey team as they photographed the cabin from distance. Blackwood Sr. and I have history. He dodged the draft while I was bleeding in Vietnamese jungles. Came back to find men like him had profited from war without risking anything. Then he tried buying land from struggling veterans who couldn't adjust to civilian life. Pennies on the dollar. Destroyed thousands of acres of pristine forest while wrapping himself in patriotic talking points. The survey team eventually moved on, but their presence had shattered the mountain's isolation. Jackson intensified Lily's training immediately, focusing on evasion tactics, emergency protocols, and recognition of potential threats. The revolver lessons expanded to include his own hunting rifle, heavier, more powerful, capable of accuracy at ranges her handgun couldn't achieve. Hope for peace, but prepare for war. Jackson positioned her behind the rifle, adjusting her grip with professional precision. Not just for hunting anymore. If Blackwood starts cutting near our cabins, we'll have heavy machinery, work crews, company security, people who'll report a young girl living in these woods. The threat accelerated their preparations. Jackson expanded their cover story, creating documentation showing mining rights and timber harvest exceptions dating back generations for Hayes family properties. The legal fiction might not withstand thorough investigation, but it could deter casual corporate encroachment if delivered with sufficient confidence. March brought warming temperatures that transformed the forest. Snow retreated gradually up the mountainsides, exposing dormant vegetation waiting to explode into spring growth. Streams swelled with meltwater, their peaceful winter silence replaced by constant rushing. Wildlife emerged from hibernation, hungry and active, creating new challenges for security around the cabins. Tommy's visits increased with improving weather. His boundless curiosity led him farther into the mountains than his parents realized, exploring areas they considered too remote for a 9-year-old. He became Lily's window into conventional childhood, bringing books from his family's collection, sharing stories of school before his parents had chosen remote homeschooling, occasionally smuggling homemade cookies or jerky to supplement their wilderness diet. More critically, Tommy provided intelligence about Maxwell Timber's expanding presence in the region. His father, who occasionally took seasonal work with logging operations, reported increasing survey activities throughout the national forest. Environmental protests had blocked Maxwell's previous attempts at obtaining permits, but rumors suggested political connections might overcome those obstacles during the current administration. Jackson integrated this information into their defensive planning, mapping buffer zones around their cabins and establishing early warning systems. Tripwires connected to silent indicators, strategically placed reflective markers visible only from certain angles, even scouts training to bark distinctively for human intruders versus wildlife. The preparations seemed excessive until fresh boot prints appeared near Lily's garden plot one morning. Someone had approached within 20 yards of her cabin during the night, observed for some time, then departed toward the valley. Not hunters or hikers. Jackson studied the distinctive tread pattern. These are tactical boots, security contractors, most likely. Maxwell uses them to intimidate environmental activists and discourage trespassers before beginning operations. They're searching for obstacles before bringing in equipment. The intrusion confirmed their vulnerability. Jackson accelerated the legal preparations, finalizing documentation that would protect Lily regardless of what happened to him. Your identity is established now. School records show consistent homeschooling. Medical records document vaccinations and checkups. Bank account and trust has sufficient funds for essentials until you're 18. If we're separated for any reason, you have legitimate standing as my granddaughter. The documents represented more than practical protection. They formalized the bond that had developed between them, transforming their alliance of necessity into chosen family. Jackson had fought through bureaucratic systems he'd avoided for decades, calling in favors from fellow veterans in key positions, creating a safety net for a child he'd known barely 3 months. The commitment carried weight beyond biological connection, born of recognized kinship between damaged souls seeking healing in the same sanctuary. April arrived with violent unpredictability, days of warming sunshine interrupted by sudden snowstorms, temperature swings of 50 degrees within hours, wind events that tested every repair they'd made to the cabins. During one particularly chaotic afternoon, with thunder snow illuminating the mountains in strobing flashes, Tommy arrived at Lily's door unexpected and panicked. "Dad's trapped. A tree fell on our shed during chores, his legs pinned. Mom sent me for help while she tries keeping him warm. His words tumbled out between gasping breaths, the 3-mile run through deteriorating conditions having exhausted his small body. Jackson grabbed emergency supplies without hesitation. Heavy storms blocked the valley road. Closest help is 2 hours away if they could even reach emergency services. Stay here with Lily. We'll bring your father back. The rescue operation demanded every skill Jackson had developed through decades of wilderness living and military service. He navigated the treacherous terrain, with Lily following closely, carrying medical supplies while he transported tools for extraction. The storm intensified around them, reducing visibility to mere yards, transforming familiar trails into treacherous obstacles. When they reached Tommy's family cabin, they found his mother desperately trying to protect her husband from hypothermia, while he remained pinned beneath a massive oak that had crashed through their woodshed. The collaboration that followed demonstrated their peculiar strengths: Jackson's tactical assessment and physical power, Lily's smaller hands accessing tight spaces to apply pressure bandages, their combined knowledge of wilderness medicine addressing immediate trauma while formulating extraction plans. It took nearly 3 hours to leverage the tree, enough for removal, stabilize the injured leg, and construct a travois for transport back to Jackson's better-equipped cabin. By the time they arrived, Tommy's father hovered near shock from blood loss and exposure. Jackson revealed medical training beyond basic first aid, setting the broken bone, administering antibiotics from a carefully maintained supply, establishing intravenous fluids with practiced efficiency. When Tommy's mother questioned these unusual capabilities, Jackson deflected with practiced ease. Field medic training. Never know what might happen up here, so I stay prepared. The emergency created unexpected complications. With the valley road blocked by multiple landslides, Tommy's family had no choice but to shelter with Jackson until conditions improved. Their presence threatened the carefully constructed narrative Lily and Jackson had established. Close quarters, making their supposed grandfather-granddaughter relationship subject to extended observation by adults with children of their own. Yet the crisis ultimately strengthened their cover. Tommy's parents, grateful for their son's safety and husband's treatment, accepted the explained relationship without suspicion. Jackson's gruff competence registered as the expected behavior of a widowed veteran raising his orphaned granddaughter in the mountains. Lily's unusual maturity seemed natural for a child educated through practical wilderness living rather than conventional schooling. Their performance, honed through months of preparation, withstood direct scrutiny. When weather finally cleared enough for Tommy's family to return home a week later, their departure left an unexpected void. The cabin seemed too quiet without Tommy's constant questions, his mother's cooking, his father's mechanical expertise that had improved several of Jackson's systems. The experience had demonstrated something vital about their mountain existence. Isolation provided safety, but sacrificed the fundamental human need for community. Even Jackson, who'd chosen solitude for decades, had visibly relaxed in the presence of constructive activity and purposeful collaboration. The family's departure coincided with new developments in Maxwell Timber's regional activities. Supply trucks began appearing on the logging access road that wound through the valley below, delivering equipment staged for operations once permits finalized. Jackson increased reconnaissance missions, gathering intelligence about Maxwell's movements while maintaining careful distance from security personnel. During one such observation session, positioned on a ridge overlooking the staging area, Jackson handed Lily the binoculars with unusual tension. The older man by the white truck, that's Maxwell Blackwood himself, doesn't often appear on site this early in operations. Something's accelerated their timeline. Through magnified lenses, Lily observed a tall, distinguished man in his 70s, silver-haired and expensively dressed, despite the rugged setting, directing operations with authoritative gestures. His presence emanated power, not the earned authority of Jackson's military bearing, but entitled command born of financial dominance. Even from distance, his dismissive treatment of workers registered in abrupt gestures and impatient expressions. He looks angry. Lily continued observing as Blackwood berated a younger man holding documentation, his son, based on Jackson's description. Investors getting nervous about delays. Jackson's voice carried decades of observation. Environmental impact studies found endangered salamander populations in 3 watersheds, their operations would affect. Permits stalled again. Maxwell doesn't handle obstacles well, used to buying his way through problems. The binoculars revealed Blackwood gesturing emphatically toward the mountain, and specifically toward the ridge where their cabin stood hidden among dense forest. His expression suggested particular frustration with that area, his finger jabbing repeatedly at maps spread across a vehicle hood. He's targeting our section first. Jackson's realization carried ominous certainty. The salamander populations concentrate around the natural springs near our cabins. If he can clear-cut that area before biological surveys complete, the evidence disappears. Create facts on the ground that can't be reversed, then pay whatever fine gets assessed. The threat crystallized their situation with new urgency. Maxwell Timber wasn't simply expanding operations near their sanctuary. They were specifically targeting the ecosystem that protected their isolation. Within weeks, the peaceful forests surrounding their cabins could transform into industrial logging operations, bringing dozens of workers, security personnel, and inevitably questions about the young girl living in the wilderness. Jackson intensified their defensive preparations immediately, but nature delivered its own complication the following day. Tommy arrived breathless at Lily's cabin near dusk, excitement overwhelming his usual caution. Found something amazing in the North Caves, some kind of old military stuff hidden under rocks, metal boxes with locks, canvas bags, even old radio equipment. His discovery ignited immediate concern. The location matched one marked on the map found with Eleanor's revolver, potentially part of the rumored military cache. "Show us tomorrow, Tommy." Jackson's voice projected calm authority despite visible tension. Too dangerous to explore caves near nightfall, especially with this weather moving in. The incoming system promised significant snowfall despite the advanced spring date. A last gasp of winter before full thaw transformed the mountain. Tommy's disappointment battled with ingrained respect for mountain dangers. "The caves aren't far. We could take flashlights." His pleading face reflected childhood's eternal optimism. Adventure's call, drowning out caution's whisper. "Tomorrow," Jackson repeated firmly. "First light, we'll investigate properly equipped." Military equipment could mean unexploded ordnance or other hazards. Safety protocols exist for reasons, soldier. The title, soldier, straightened Tommy's posture instinctively, Jackson's military authority triggering respect beyond his years. His reluctant agreement secured, he departed for home with promise to return at dawn, Scout escorting him to the property boundary as had become their custom when darkness approached. The storm arrived hours earlier than forecast, transforming gentle evening snowfall into raging blizzard by midnight. Wind howled through mountain passes, driving snow horizontally against cabin walls and reducing visibility to arm's length. Temperature plummeted 20 degrees in 60 minutes, freezing exposed water into instant ice and transforming wet surfaces into treacherous glass. Jackson arrived at Lily's cabin before first light, expression grave beneath his heavy weather gear. "Tommy never made it home last night. His parents just reached me by emergency radio. They assumed he was still with us when darkness fell. Now he's missing in whiteout conditions, 12 hours overnight exposure." The revelation struck like physical blow. Lily's mind immediately constructed scenarios. Tommy attempting to return to the caves alone to claim discovery rights, becoming disoriented in deteriorating conditions, seeking shelter in unknown terrain. Scout's ears perked at her emotional response, the dog immediately alert to potential action. He was heading north when he left. Toward those caves, he mentioned. Scout can track him if the snow hasn't buried the scent completely. Lily was already gathering emergency supplies, layering clothing for extended exposure. Jackson nodded, military planning replacing emotional response. 20 degrees with wind chill near zero. If he found shelter, he might survive with moderate hypothermia. If not, the unfinished sentence hung between them, unnecessary to complete. Without protection in these conditions, a small body would succumb to exposure within hours. They departed immediately, Scout ranging ahead seeking scent traces despite accumulating snow. Jackson carried full rescue equipment, thermal blankets, chemical warmers, emergency medical supplies, collapsible stretcher. Lily maintained focus on Scout, interpreting subtle changes in his search pattern as he worked through diminishing scent trails. The dog repeatedly lost and reacquired the trace, working methodically despite deteriorating conditions that would have defeated less determined trackers. 2 hours into their search, visibility improved momentarily as they crested a ridge, revealing the northern valley spread below. The cave system Tommy had mentioned became visible, a series of dark openings in the limestone cliff face approximately half a mile ahead. Scout's behavior changed instantly, his patterns shifting from tentative searching to confident purpose. He's got something solid. Lily followed the dog as he navigated the steep descent toward the caves, Jackson maintaining protective position behind her, securing their path against potential falls on the ice-slick terrain. The weather closed in again as they approached the cliff base, reducing visibility to mere yards. But Scout maintained unwavering direction toward the central cave opening. The entrance loomed suddenly through swirling snow, a jagged mouth in gray stone, icicles forming natural bars across its upper portion. Scout paused at the threshold, whining with anticipation, but waiting for command before proceeding into the darkness. Jackson produced powerful flashlights, their beams cutting through subterranean gloom to reveal a tunnel extending approximately 30 feet before opening into a larger chamber. Scout's path remained confident, following invisible scent markers despite the masking mineral odors of the cave system. They proceeded cautiously, aware of potential structural instabilities in the limestone formation. The main chamber revealed evidence of human modification, rough-hewn steps descending to a lower level, support timbers reinforcing natural columns, even ancient electrical conduit attached to the walls. Military storage facility, exactly as rumored. Jackson examined the modifications with professional assessment, probably established during Cold War preparations, used for cash storage in case of Soviet invasion or nuclear exchange. These mountains hosted dozens of similar installations, government contingencies hidden from public knowledge. Tommy. Lily's call echoed through the chambers, repeating into diminishing returns from deeper passages. Scout's behavior shifted again, excitement rather than concern, tail wagging as he led them toward a side tunnel barely tall enough for Jackson to navigate without stooping. The passage opened into a smaller chamber, where beam light revealed their missing explorer huddled beside a stack of metal containers, multiple blankets wrapped around his shivering form. "Knew you'd find me." Tommy's voice emerged weakened but triumphant despite chattering teeth and alarming blue tinge to his lips. "Got caught by the storm halfway back. Remembered your lessons about seeking immediate shelter instead of pushing through whiteout conditions. The cache includes emergency supplies, blankets, chemical heaters, even some ancient rations. Still cold, though." Jackson's medical assessment proceeded with practiced efficiency. Core temperature, dangerously low, but not yet critical. Extremities showing early frostbite signs, but no permanent damage apparent. Mental function remaining coherent despite exposure. The emergency warming protocol began immediately. Chemical heat packs positioned at major blood vessels. Insulated wrapping secured around torso. Warmed fluids administered in small sips. While Lily assisted with Tommy's treatment, Jackson examined the military cache with increasing interest. The containers Tommy had discovered appeared relatively intact despite decades of storage. Ammunition boxes, medical supplies, and most significantly, document cases bearing high-level classification markings faded but still legible on metal surfaces. What Tommy stumbled upon might be more valuable than mere emergency supplies. These look like operational records, military documents never intended for civilian eyes. Jackson worked a rusted lock open with specialized tools from his pack, revealing folders containing papers, photographs, and maps preserved in watertight packaging. His examination halted abruptly at one particular file, expression transforming from professional curiosity to focused intensity. These are land survey documents, original Department of Defense assessments before establishing this facility, legal boundary determinations, watershed protections, mineral rights allocations. And look at this property demarcation. The map Jackson indicated showed precise boundaries of government holdings in the region, significantly larger than current national forest designations, encompassing much of the terrain Maxwell Timber had been surveying for operations. Additional documents detailed legislative protections established for national security purposes, never rescinded despite the facility's decommissioning. Blackwood doesn't own logging rights to any of this land. Jackson's voice held quiet triumph as he examined dated endorsements from multiple federal agencies. These mountains were designated military reservation property with perpetual conservation easements after the installation closed, specifically protected against private development or resource extraction. The modern boundaries showing smaller protected areas are administrative errors, never legally established. The discovery's implications expanded beyond their immediate situation. Not just their cabins, but the entire northern watershed remained legally protected despite decades of assumption otherwise. Maxwell's operations wouldn't merely violate environmental regulations, they would constitute federal trespass on designated government property, regardless of whatever permits local authorities might have issued. We found our leverage. Jackson carefully resealed the documents in waterproof packaging. Proof that Blackwood's entire operation violates national security provisions, never declassified or rescinded. Even his political connections can't override Department of Defense jurisdictions without congressional intervention. As Tommy's condition stabilized and preparation for evacuation began, Lily recognized the discovery's significance beyond merely protecting their mountain sanctuary. These documents represented power, legitimate authority against corporate intrusion, legal protection against Blackwood's operations, and ultimately, security for their continued existence in the wilderness they'd claimed as home. What began as a desperate search for a lost child had transformed into unexpected opportunity, ammunition for the coming battle against forces threatening everything they'd built. The mountain had tested them again, delivering both crisis and opportunity in the same violent storm. As they prepared to transport Tommy home through still hazardous conditions, Lily understood that their isolation had ended permanently. The outside world had found their sanctuary, bringing threat and conflict inevitably following. But they had found something equally significant: documentary evidence providing legitimate protection, transforming their defensive posture from vulnerable squatters to legal occupants with powerful institutional backing. The real war for their mountain home was just beginning, but now they had weapons beyond rifles and survival skills, truth preserved in decades-old documents, waiting in darkness until precisely the right moment for discovery. As they emerged from the cave into continuing storm, the hidden military facility disappeared behind them, its secrets now part of their arsenal against those who would destroy the wilderness they called home. Spring unfolded across the mountains with relentless vitality. Meadows erupted in wildflowers, dormant trees unfurled tender leaves, and wildlife emerged in abundance from winter's constraints. The transformation mirrored changes in Lily's circumstances. What began as desperate survival had evolved into purposeful existence with unexpected allies in clearer direction. Tommy's rescue from the military cache had strengthened bonds with his family, creating a small but reliable community. The discovered documents provided legal leverage against Maxwell Timber's encroachment. Yet beneath these positive developments, Jackson's health had begun a subtle decline that Lily observed with increasing concern. The cough started in late April, initially dismissed as seasonal allergies but persisting with growing intensity. Jackson's endurance diminished during their patrols of property boundaries. Rest periods lengthened. Weight dropped from his already lean frame. When Lily questioned these changes, Jackson deflected with military stoicism, focusing instead on strategic planning for confronting Maxwell Blackwood's operation. Those documents won't implement themselves. Jackson spread the cache materials across his cabin table, organizing them into categories of legal significance. Corporate operations start next month when ground conditions support heavy equipment. We need proper legal counsel before then, someone who understands federal land designation complexities. His fingers trembled slightly while sorting papers, a neuromuscular symptom he couldn't conceal. The legal strategy developed methodically. Jackson contacted former military associates now working in environmental law, veterans affairs, and government land management. The connections, dormant for decades, reactivated through shared understanding of what was at stake. Initial responses confirmed their assessment. The documents revealed legitimate federal protections never properly rescinded, rendering Maxwell's permits invalid regardless of local approvals. Implementing their defense required breaking isolation, a psychological barrier more significant than physical distance. For Lily's first journey to civilization, Jackson selected Pine Ridge, a small town 30 miles from their mountain sanctuary where his occasional supply runs had established minimal recognition without excessive curiosity. Their cover story would face its first significant test beyond Tommy's family. You'll need appropriate clothing. Jackson assessed Lily's wilderness-adapted wardrobe with tactical consideration. Nothing too new or fashionable, that attracts attention. Nothing too worn either, suggests neglect. Middle-class practicality is our camouflage. Ordinary people become effectively invisible. The transformation process extended beyond appearance into behavioral protocols. Jackson drilled Lily on conversational techniques, deflecting personal questions without apparent evasion, maintaining consistent biographical details, projecting confidence without arrogance when interacting with authority figures. The preparation resembled mission briefings from his military days, contingency planning for various social encounters they might face. Lily absorbed everything with focused intensity. The journey to Pine Ridge represented both risk and necessity, exposing their constructed reality to outside scrutiny while establishing connections essential for their continued mountain existence. Jackson's declining health added unspoken urgency to these preparations. If his condition worsened, Lily would need established community ties and independent capabilities beyond wilderness survival. The trip occurred on a quiet Tuesday when tourist traffic remained minimal in the small mountain town. Jackson's aged but meticulously maintained truck navigated winding forest roads towards civilization. Each mile traversed seemed to physically transform him. Military alertness replacing woodland comfort, jaw tightening with suppressed tension, eyes constantly scanning for potential threats. Lily realized how completely Jackson had adapted to isolation, how profoundly conventional society had become foreign territory after decades in wilderness sanctuary. Pine Ridge emerged from surrounding forest, a modest collection of buildings serving local residents and seasonal tourists exploring the national forest. Main Street consisted of essential businesses: general store, hardware supplier, diner, gas station, small medical clinic, surrounded by scattered residential neighborhoods climbing adjacent hillsides. American flags adorned many buildings, their patriotic display contrasting with the anti-government sentiment often expressed in rural communities. We'll visit James at the general store first. Jackson parked in an inconspicuous corner of the municipal lot, positioning for quick departure if necessary. Been trading with him for years. Dried goods, ammunition, basic supplies. Never mentioned personal details, but he's the closest thing to an ally in town. Remember your backstory. Observe more than you speak. Mason's general store occupied a weathered two-story building with wide porch and hand-painted sign. The bell above the door announced their entry into the dim interior. Scout hesitated at the threshold, uncertain about the enclosed space filled with unfamiliar scents. Lily gently encouraged him forward, her own senses overwhelmed by the concentration of manufactured goods after months of natural surroundings. "Well now, you must be Robert's granddaughter." The voice came from behind the counter, where an older man with wire-rimmed glasses observed them with frank curiosity. "He mentioned you'd be coming sometime." "I'm James Mason. Your grandfather and I go back almost 30 years. Lily summoned her practiced response, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Yes, sir, I'm Lily. Grandpa's been teaching me about trading. He sent me with these herbs and mushrooms to exchange for supplies." She placed her carefully wrapped bundles on the counter, medicinal herbs and morel mushrooms harvested from spring forest bounty. James examined her offerings with professional interest, opening packages to assess quality and quantity. "Excellent morels, best I've seen this season. And these herbal preparations?" He held a tincture bottle to the light, examining the amber liquid within. "Old Robert's teaching you his ways, I see." "Yes, sir. He says knowledge should flow forward to have value." Something in this simple statement caused James to study her more intently, his expression softening. "Indeed it should. Your grandfather is a wise man, if excessively fond of solitude." He began calculating values, making notes in a worn ledger. "What do you need in exchange today?" Lily produced Jackson's list, modified for her current needs: salt, specific tools, seeds unavailable from their own saving, medical supplies, and a few modest luxuries like coffee and sugar. James gathered these items efficiently, occasionally suggesting alternatives or additions based on recent stock. Throughout the transaction, Lily maintained her composed demeanor despite internal anxiety. Their story held. James accepted her as Jackson's granddaughter without question. their business proceeding smoothly despite her youth. The legal groundwork Jackson had established created a protective framework that functioned exactly as intended. As James tallied their exchange, Lily noticed a bulletin board near the store entrance covered with local notices, announcements, and photographs. One image caught her attention, a group photo labeled Pine Ridge Volunteer Fire Department, showing men and women in uniforms standing before newly delivered emergency equipment. "Those folks saved half the county last winter," James commented, following her gaze. "Worst ice storm in 30 years. Your grandfather's place make it through okay?" "Yes, sir. We had some damage, but nothing we couldn't repair." James nodded approvingly. "Mountain folk handle their own problems when possible." "Speaking of problems," his voice lowered slightly, "there's talk about Maxwell Timber moving equipment to the North Valley next month. Started hiring local crews last week, claiming they'll bring prosperity, but we've seen how that goes in other communities. Short-term jobs, long-term destruction. Your grandfather's property might be affected. The opportunity presented itself naturally. We've been looking into land designations, actually." Lily chose her words carefully, following Jackson's instructions about information security. "Found some interesting government documents about the Northern Watershed. Military protections that were never properly rescinded." James's expression shifted from casual conversation to focused interest. "You don't say?" "Blackwood's been waiving permits from the county commissioner like victory flags. Claims everything's approved for clear-cutting 3,000 acres starting with the North Ridge. The environmental groups filed objections, but their injunction got denied last month. The county commissioner doesn't supersede federal jurisdiction, especially regarding former military installations." Lily recited the legal principle Jackson had taught her, watching James process this information with growing awareness of its significance. Their business concluded, Lily carefully packed the traded supplies into her backpack, prioritizing weight distribution for the journey home. James watched with approval at her methodical approach. "You're a capable young lady. Robert's done well with you." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "If those documents could help stop Blackwood, a lot of folks around here would be grateful. Man's been buying up half the county, forcing old-timers to sell through various pressures. Not everyone welcomes his kind of progress." Outside the store, Lily took a moment to absorb her first significant independent interaction with the wider world. She had navigated a complex social situation, successfully maintained their necessary story, and secured valuable supplies while establishing potential alliance against Maxwell Timber. The accomplishment bolstered her confidence that Jackson's arrangements would protect her continued independence. Before leaving town, they made one additional stop at the small local library. Jackson had occasionally borrowed books during his visits, carefully selected to supplement his own collection without drawing attention to his unusual lifestyle. Lily followed his example, selecting practical volumes on wilderness medicine, food preservation, and forest ecology. The elderly librarian processed her selections with minimal questions, recognizing Jackson's name on the account and accepting Lily's explanation without suspicion. "Your grandfather always returns books in perfect condition," she noted while stamping due dates. "A rare quality these days." Their successful expedition to Pine Ridge represented significant progress in their strategy against Maxwell Timber and Lily's broader integration with external society. Yet the journey back to their mountain sanctuary revealed concerning deterioration in Jackson's condition. The brief interaction with civilization had depleted his limited energy reserves. By the time they reached the cabin, his breathing had grown labored, coughing spasms racking his frame with increasing frequency. That night, while organizing their newly acquired supplies, Lily confronted the reality she could no longer ignore. "We need to talk about your health. Real talk, not deflection." Her direct approach reflected months of learning Jackson's communication style. He responded to tactical directness rather than emotional appeals. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire and Scout's soft breathing from his place near the hearth. Finally, Jackson's military facade cracked, revealing the vulnerability beneath his carefully maintained strength. "Stage 4 lung cancer, diagnosed before I met you during my annual VA checkup last fall. Refused treatment then, didn't see the point in extending a solitary existence through painful interventions." His voice remained steady despite the devastating content. "Prognosis was 6 months without treatment. That timeline's proving accurate. The revelation stunned Lily despite her growing suspicions. Her carefully constructed new life, the sanctuary she'd found, the protection Jackson provided, all existed under immediate threat more significant than Maxwell Timber's operations. The mountain had given, then prepared to take away, following its unsentimental pattern of challenge and response. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question emerged raw with emotion she rarely displayed. Jackson considered her with the same evaluative gaze he'd used during their first meeting, assessing capacity rather than offering comfort. "Initially, you were a temporary complication, a child needing immediate assistance until spring made alternative arrangements possible. Then you became a student with remarkable aptitude for wilderness adaptation. By the time I recognized you'd become family, telling you seemed unnecessarily cruel. You'd already experienced enough abandonment." The truth crystallized Lily's understanding of their relationship's evolution, from reluctant rescue to strategic alliance to genuine connection transcending conventional family structures. Jackson had protected her not merely from physical threats, but from emotional devastation, delaying the inevitable revelation until her resilience had developed sufficiently to withstand it. How long? The question contained multitudes. How long until symptoms become debilitating? Until independent function becomes impossible? Until final departure? Weeks, not months. Jackson's assessment carried clinical precision. Bone metastasis progressing rapidly. Pain manageable currently with medications from my veterans benefits. But that window's closing. His gaze locked with hers, soldier to soldier rather than adult to child. "I've made all necessary arrangements. Legal documentation establishing guardianship is filed with multiple authorities. Financial resources secured in trusts accessible through James Mason as executor. The cabin and surrounding 60 acres transferred to your name with conservation easements preventing development." The comprehensive preparations reflected Jackson's military thoroughness. Contingency planning extended beyond physical survival into legal, financial, and community frameworks. He had created protection extending beyond his physical presence, a defensive perimeter against institutional intervention that might separate Lily from her mountain sanctuary. Implementation of their strategy against Maxwell Timber accelerated with Jackson's revelation. Their attorney, a former military legal officer specializing in federal land cases, submitted formal documentation to multiple agencies: Forest Service, Department of Interior, Department of Defense, and State Environmental Protection Divisions. The legal challenge created immediate complications for Blackwood's operation, triggering automatic reviews that delayed equipment deployment while jurisdiction questions resolved. Maxwell Timber's response came swiftly and directly. 3 black SUVs appeared at the Forest Road terminus nearest their property 1 week after filing legal challenges. Security personnel in tactical clothing established observation positions overlooking approach routes to both cabins. Their presence announced clear intimidation intent, corporate power demonstrating reach beyond legal frameworks into physical territory. Jackson observed these developments with professional assessment rather than alarm. Classic pressure tactics, seen it during corporate resource grabs across South America after Vietnam. They're expecting frightened locals to withdraw complaints when confronted with paramilitary presence. His tactical analysis continued despite deteriorating physical condition, mind remaining sharp as body failed. The confrontation escalated when James Mason delivered disturbing news during their next supply exchange. "Blackwood's been asking questions around town. Specific questions about you and Lily, offering financial incentives for information about property boundaries, visitation patterns, potential vulnerabilities. Most folks staying quiet, but money loosens some tongues." This development transformed their defense posture immediately. Jackson implemented security protocols developed during his special operations career, alternative shelters established in multiple locations, equipment caches positioned for emergency access, communication signals arranged with Tommy's family for mutual alert systems. Lily absorbed these tactical lessons while simultaneously managing Jackson's increasing medical needs, administering pain medications, preparing easily digestible meals, monitoring vital signs with equipment obtained through veteran services. Maxwell Blackwood himself appeared at their property boundary in late May, a calculated intrusion precisely when Jackson's condition had deteriorated significantly. The corporate titan arrived with minimal entourage, one security detail and his son James, parking their vehicle at the Forest Road terminus and proceeding on foot to the clearing before Jackson's cabin. Their timing suggested inside information about the veteran's weakened state, perhaps obtained through medical channels or local informants. Lily observed their approach from concealed position per security protocols, Scout silent beside her despite his instinctive protective response. Jackson awaited the visitors on his porch, oxygen concentrator humming quietly beside his chair, hunting rifle positioned casually across his lap. A message about remaining capabilities despite obvious illness. Robert Hayes. Blackwood's voice carried artificial congeniality as he approached the property boundary. Or should I say Staff Sergeant Hayes, Vietnam, Special Forces, Distinguished Service Cross recipient. Been a long time since Saigon. The greeting confirmed Lily's suspicions about inside information. Blackwood had researched Jackson extensively, including military records normally protected from casual access. Jackson's response revealed nothing beyond mild acknowledgement, conserving limited energy for essential communication. You're trespassing on private property, Maxwell. State your business or depart. The directness stripped away social pretense, establishing immediate power dynamics despite Jackson's physical disadvantage. Blackwood's expression tightened briefly before reassembling into practiced corporate diplomacy. I'd hoped for more collegial discussion between fellow Americans who serve their country. His gesture encompassed the surrounding forest. You've chosen isolation, which I respect, but progress requires balance between conservation and economic development. These mountains can provide sustainable lumber harvest while maintaining ecological integrity. My company employs hundreds of local families. The practice speech encountered Jackson's unflinching assessment. You're attempting operations on federally protected land using permits obtained through misrepresentation of property designations. The documentation we've submitted proves those boundaries were established through Department of Defense jurisdiction, superseding county approvals. Blackwood's diplomatic mask slipped, revealing calculating hardness beneath. Documentation can be interpreted many ways, especially decades-old military paperwork with ambiguous designations. Courts take years to resolve such technicalities. Meanwhile, operations proceed, trees fall, and realities change before legal determinations conclude. The veiled threat hung between them. Corporate resources could outlast legal challenges through procedural delays while irreversible environmental damage occurred. Jackson's limited lifespan added personal urgency to this strategy, a calculation Blackwood had clearly incorporated into his approach. What do you truly want, Maxwell? The directness cut through pretense. You've never personally visited operation sites during preliminary phases. This isn't about timber rights, it's about our specific history. Blackwood's composure fractured further, personal animosity emerging through corporate veneer. You and your war buddies have interfered with my business operations for decades. Environmental complaints, veterans' protests, conservation easement, strategically positioned to block access routes. This watershed represents the last significant timber resource in the county I don't control. His voice hardened with finality. I'm offering one opportunity. Withdraw your legal challenges, accept fair compensation for your property, and relocate with dignity. Otherwise, corporate security will establish continuous presence surrounding your property, documenting any violations that might affect custody of your alleged granddaughter. The explicit threat against Lily transformed the confrontation instantly. Jackson's physical limitations seemed to temporarily recede, military bearing reasserting despite terminal illness. You've miscalculated severely if you believe threatening a child improves your negotiating position. His voice carried deadly quiet certainty. We both know what happens to men who target families in conflict zones. The exchange ended without resolution, Blackwood departing with final warning about imminent equipment deployment regardless of pending legal reviews. When the corporate contingent disappeared down the forest road, Jackson collapsed into coughing spasms that produced bright blood on his handkerchief, physical price of the confrontation's stress. That night, as Lily administered increased pain medication, Jackson provided crucial context for Blackwood's personal vendetta. Maxwell and I crossed paths during Vietnam. He worked at procurement contracts, massive profits from military supplies, while living comfortably in Saigon officers' quarters. Meanwhile, my team operated in conditions you can't imagine. Jackson's breathing labored between sentences, determination pushing through physical limitations. After the war, he leveraged connections into timber concessions throughout Southeast Asia, environmental destruction, indigenous displacement, resource extraction without accountability. The revelation illuminated deeper dimensions of their conflict, not merely current land disputes, but fundamental ethical opposition extending decades into shared history. When several veterans, including myself, began organizing environmental protections against his operations here, he initiated systematic retaliation, financial, legal, eventually physical intimidation. Two cabins belonging to my former teammates burned under suspicious circumstances. One colleague died in a supposed hunting accident after filing complaints about water contamination from logging operations. Their strategic position had deteriorated significantly. Jackson's declining health, Blackwood's explicit threats against Lily, and corporate security's continuous presence created immediate danger beyond legal challenges. Evacuation options existed. Tommy's family had offered shelter. Veterans networks could provide relocation assistance. Legal authorities might intervene if presented evidence of corporate intimidation. Yet each alternative violated their fundamental objective, maintaining independence within their mountain sanctuary. The decision crystallized through necessity rather than choice. We fight from where we stand. Jackson's tactical assessment emerged through increasing physical weakness. This mountain is worth defending, not just our personal sanctuary, but watershed protecting communities downslope, ecosystems developed over centuries. Principle that corporate power doesn't automatically supersede individual rights or environmental preservation. The defense strategy evolved to asymmetric response. They couldn't match Blackwood's resources in conventional confrontation, but wilderness provided advantages to those who understood its applications. Jackson directed operations from his increasingly limited mobility, while Lily implemented practical countermeasures. Scout patrols identified security positions surrounding their property. Tommy's family provided intelligence about equipment deployments and crew schedules. Veterans networks initiated media campaigns highlighting corporate intimidation of terminal cancer patient and orphaned granddaughter. June arrived with ominous developments. Heavy equipment began assembling at staging areas despite ongoing legal reviews. Corporate security expanded surveillance operations with advanced technology, and Blackwood accelerated community pressure through economic incentives to local businesses dependent on his planned operations. The confrontation approached inevitable climax as Jackson's condition deteriorated toward final stages. On the summer solstice, longest day of mountain light, Jackson summoned remaining strength for critical conversation. We need to discuss what happens after I'm gone. No more deflection or comfortable euphemisms. His voice maintained remarkable steadiness, despite requiring oxygen support between sentences. You have legal standing, financial resources, and community connections we've established. But practical considerations remain about maintaining this life alone. The discussion continued through afternoon into evening, detailed contingencies for various scenarios, contact protocols with supportive networks, seasonal maintenance requirements for the twins, arrangements for continued education through correspondence programs. Jackson's tactical mind remained sharp despite physical deterioration, identifying potential vulnerabilities and establishing defensive measures extending beyond his lifetime. Most critical decision involves Maxwell's operations. Jackson's assessment reflected military prioritization of objectives. Fighting perpetual defensive action against corporate resources isn't sustainable for you alone. We need decisive resolution while I can still contribute strategically. The analysis led to uncomfortable but necessary conclusion. They required public exposure beyond legal frameworks, leveraging media attention against corporate intimidation through direct confrontation. The plan developed with Jackson's special operations precision, documentation organized for maximum impact, communications prepared for media distribution, physical evidence assembled revealing corporate security's illegal surveillance and intimidation tactics. The timing required careful calculation, exposing Blackwood's operations without creating vulnerability for Lily after Jackson's death necessitated particular sequence of revelations through trusted intermediaries. The strategy implementation began immediately, But Jackson's decline accelerated beyond medical projections. Pain medications proved increasingly inadequate against advancing bone metastasis. Consciousness fluctuated through difficult days. Lucidity emerged in diminishing windows between medication cycles. Yet throughout physical deterioration, his determination remained undiminished, completing essential documentation, recording testimony, establishing final protections for Lily's future. On a crystal-clear July morning, with sunlight streaming through cabin windows and mountain air carrying pine scent through open doors, Jackson gathered final strength for necessary goodbye. His voice emerged weakened but purposeful. "You've become everything I hoped for when I first decided to help you. Not just a survivor, but someone who understands why wilderness matters, why freedom requires commitment beyond comfort or convenience." Lily held his hand as breathing became increasingly labored. Scout positioned protectively at bedside, sensing transitions approach. "The mission continues through you now." Jackson's military bearing maintained even as physical systems failed. This mountain doesn't belong to corporations or government agencies. It belongs to those willing to defend its inherent value beyond resource extraction or property development. His gaze held remarkable clarity despite imminent transition. "You'll be magnificent. This mountain lucky to have you." His breathing slowed further, pauses lengthening until with gentle inevitability, they ceased altogether. The hand in Lily's gradually cooled as morning sunbeams filtered through forest-edge windows, illuminating the peaceful expression on the old soldier's face. A man who had finally found his rest after decades of seeking it. Lily allowed herself one day of unrestrained grief, curled beside Scout on the cabin floor, unwilling to leave Jackson's presence. She wept for the man who had become more family than blood relations had ever been, for knowledge still untapped, for conversations that would never occur. Mostly she wept for herself, once again left alone in a world that seemed determined to take her protectors. But unlike her mother's abandonment, Jackson's departure had been faced with courage, preparation, and care for what would follow. He had given her every possible tool for continuing without him: practical skills, legal protection, financial security, and most importantly, confidence to face whatever challenges arose. The following day, Lily performed the burial ritual exactly as they had planned during his final months. She prepared his body according to his wishes, wrapped in simple shroud of natural fabric without chemicals or preservation. His favorite knife and small book of poetry placed beside him. Using the gravesite he had selected on a promontory overlooking the valley, she dug the earth with methodical care, layering the bottom with pine boughs. The physical labor provided outlet for her grief, each shovel of rocky mountain soil connecting her to the land that had shaped them both. When the task was complete, Lily placed Jackson's body in its final resting place, covered it with more fragrant pine branches, and returned the earth from which he had drawn strength for over 30 years. As the last stones were positioned on the grave mound, Lily stood in the fading afternoon light, Scout a warm presence against her leg. "The mountain receives one of its own today," she said into the silence, her voice steady despite tears tracking down her cheeks. Jackson Hayes lived by its rules, honored its ways, and taught those lessons to continue beyond his time. May his knowledge flow through me and those who come after like water through these valleys. The simple ceremony complete, Lily placed a carved wooden marker at the head of the grave, a project she had worked on secretly during Jackson's final weeks. Into its surface, she had burned his name, dates, and the words he had chosen. "I asked the mountain for solitude. It gave me purpose instead." Implementation of their strategy against Maxwell timber continued despite Jackson's death. The documentary evidence they had assembled reached environmental attorneys, veterans advocacy groups, and investigative journalists through prearranged channels. Federal agencies received formal complaints with supporting evidence of corporate intimidation against terminal cancer patient and minor dependent. Most significantly, the military cache documents establishing federal protection of the watershed gained traction through Department of Defense channels, triggering comprehensive review of boundaries and jurisdictions. Maxwell Blackwood's response proved predictably aggressive. Increased security presence around Lily's property, legal motions challenging documentation authenticity, community pressure through economic leverage with local businesses. Yet the corporate titan had miscalculated fundamental components of the situation. Jackson's preparation had established Lilly's legal standing beyond conventional challenge. The veterans network he had activated provided surveillance counterbalance to corporate security operations. Media attention focused increasingly on the compelling narrative. Orphaned girl and dying veteran defending mountain sanctuary against corporate exploitation. The winter following Jackson's death tested Lilly in ways different from her initial survival year. She possessed skills and preparation far beyond those early desperate days, but the emotional burden of solitude weighed heavily. The physical challenges of maintaining two cabins, tending to scouts' aging joints, and managing all aspects of mountain life without Jackson's guidance consumed her daylight hours. Nights proved harder. In darkness, with only the fires crackling for company, the enormity of her isolation pressed upon her. She was 16 now when most girls worried about school dances and friendship dramas. Instead, Lilly tracked winter game, repaired storm damage, and maintained continuous vigilance against Maxwell Timber's periodic testing of property boundaries. Scout provided essential companionship during this period of adjustment. The dog, now in his senior years with gray frosting his muzzle, seemed to understand his increased importance. He stayed closer than ever, his warm presence a constant reminder that she wasn't entirely alone. On the worst nights, when grief ambushed her without warning, Scout would press against her side, offering silent comfort until emotional storms passed. Spring brought resolution through unexpected channels. Federal investigations into Maxwell Timber's permit applications revealed systematic falsification of environmental impact statements and fraudulent representation of property boundaries. Department of Defense reasserted jurisdiction over the military installation lands based on documentation Lilly and Jackson had discovered. Most decisively, investigative journalism exposed Blackwood's intimidation tactics against a dying veteran and his orphaned granddaughter, creating public relations disaster that collapsed corporate stock values and triggered shareholder revolt. The morning Maxwell Timber's equipment departed from staging areas represented victory beyond Lilly's personal situation. The watershed received federal protection designation, permanently preventing commercial logging operations. Surrounding communities gained environmental safeguards for water sources originating from the mountain's complex underground springs. Veterans groups established conservation programs, maintaining Jackson's legacy of wilderness protection integrated with therapeutic opportunities for returning soldiers. Lilly's first anniversary alone on the mountain arrived with painful awareness of absence, but also recognition of accomplishment. She had not merely survived without Jackson, but actively defended their shared vision against formidable opposition. The cabins stood maintained through winter storms. Gardens flourished with spring plantings. Legal protections remained solidly established. Community connections provided security without sacrificing independence. On a crystalline April morning while tending Eleanor's medicinal herb garden outside the original cabin, Lilly noticed Scout behaving strangely. Restless movements, difficulty settling, constant scanning of the forest edge. His instincts, honed through years protecting her, signaled something beyond ordinary wildlife presence. Lilly retrieved the revolver from its storage place, positioned for defensive response if necessary. The visitor who emerged from forest shadow wasn't corporate security or government official, but James Mason from the general store, making unprecedented journey to their mountain sanctuary. His expression carried unusual gravity beyond social pleasantry. Community asked me to bring news and invitation. His formal tone reflected official capacity beyond merchant relationship. Town's organizing appreciation ceremony for veterans who protected the watershed. Jackson's name features prominently in the memorial plaque. They're requesting your presence as his representative. The invitation represented significant threshold, public acknowledgement of her existence beyond wilderness boundaries, formal recognition of Jackson's legacy, community acceptance of their unconventional family structure. Attending would mean voluntarily entering broader social frameworks they had carefully avoided, exposing herself to increased scrutiny from well-meaning but potentially intrusive attention. Jackson would hate the ceremony, but value its strategic advantages, Lilly observed, weighing options with the tactical assessment he had taught her. Public integration provides additional protection layers against future threats. Her appearance at Pine Ridge's memorial dedication created carefully managed sensation. Community members had known of Robert's granddaughter through indirect references, but few had expected the composed, articulate young woman who spoke briefly but powerfully about her grandfather's dedication to environmental protection and veterans' healing. The narrative they had constructed withstood direct public scrutiny, reinforced by Tommy's family's supportive presence and James Mason's respectful introductions to key community members. Most surprising was the attendance of dozens of veterans who had traveled considerable distances for the ceremony. Men and women whose lives Jackson had impacted through quiet intervention during their darkest moments after military service. Their stories revealed dimensions of Jackson's life Lily had never witnessed. His systematic outreach to struggling veterans, provision of wilderness therapy opportunities, even financial assistance channeled anonymously through networks of former service members. "He saved my life when nothing else could," one former Marine told Lily during the gathering following the ceremony. "Found me living in my car after 3 failed suicide attempts. Brought me to these mountains. Taught me to survive physically until I could heal mentally. Never asked recognition or repayment, just that I extend the same hand to the next soldier who needed it." Similar testimonies emerged throughout the day, illuminating Jackson's extensive impact beyond their isolated existence. He had created community while appearing to reject it, established support networks while maintaining personal distance, developed healing methodologies without professional credentials or institutional validation. The revelation transformed Lily's understanding of her mentor. He hadn't merely retreated from civilization, but created alternative support structures addressing needs conventional systems ignored. The ceremony brought unexpected opportunity through Dr. Eliza Foster, Regional Coordinator for Environmental Education Programs, who approached Lily during the community gathering. "Your knowledge of post-fire ecological succession patterns is remarkable for someone your age." Her professional assessment carried genuine respect rather than condescension. "Where did you learn botanical classification systems at that level of detail?" Lily navigated the inquiry with practiced care, balancing truth with necessary discretion. "My grandfather believed in practical education through direct observation. We documented recovery patterns following last year's controlled burns on the eastern slope." The conversation evolved into detailed discussion of forest regeneration cycles, endangered salamander populations in mountain springs, and medicinal properties of fungi emerging in burn zones. Dr. Foster's scientific expertise, matched against Lily's experiential knowledge, created unusual dialogue, bridging academic and practical perspectives. The exchange concluded with unexpected proposition. "We run summer field research programs for exceptional students interested in environmental science. No formal education requirements, just demonstrated ability and passion. You'd be perfect candidate. 6 weeks of intensive study with professional ecologists, documenting watershed systems throughout the region." The offer represented unprecedented opportunity, formal validation of knowledge acquired through wilderness necessity, connection with scientific community that could enhance her understanding beyond practical application, potential future pathway balancing mountain isolation with broader engagement. Yet it also carried complication. 6 weeks away from her sanctuary, exposure to institutional frameworks Jackson had deliberately avoided, potential threats to her carefully constructed independence. "I need to think about it." Lily's response acknowledged interest without commitment. The cabin and scout require daily attention, especially during summer growing season. Of course, Dr. Foster provided contact information with understanding smile. "The program operates entirely in field settings similar to your home environment. No classrooms or conventional academic structures. Just practical research addressing genuine environmental questions. Many participants have unconventional backgrounds like yours. Consider it an expedition rather than education in traditional sense." Returning to mountain sanctuary after public engagement brought complex emotional aftermath. The isolation that had once represented safety now carried awareness of potential connection beyond wilderness boundaries. Jackson's impact extended far beyond their cabins. Community networks, veteran support systems, environmental protection frameworks all contained his influence despite his physical absence. The revelation suggested possibility that Lily's future might similarly balance isolated independence with strategic engagement addressing larger purposes. 2 years after first finding Eleanor's abandoned cabin, Lily had established existence beyond mere survival, legal standing within conventional society, respected knowledge within specific communities, sanctuary protected through multiple defensive layers. The mountain remained her home, its demands still requiring daily attention to details of weather, wildlife, resource management, and structural maintenance. Yet integration with external networks provided security Jackson had recognized as necessary following his death. No individual survived indefinitely without strategic alliance, regardless of wilderness skills or self-reliance philosophy. Scout's declining health measured passing time with inescapable clarity. The dog who had followed abandoned child from gas station to mountain sanctuary now moved with elderly caution, joints stiffened by arthritis, energy conserved for essential activities. Lily adjusted their routines accordingly, ensuring his comfort while respecting his continued desire to participate in daily tasks. His protective instinct remained undiminished despite physical limitations, still positioning himself between Lily and potential threats, still alerting to unusual movements in surrounding forest. On a golden October afternoon with mountain slopes transformed into brilliant tapestry of autumn colors, Scout's condition deteriorated beyond medication's assistance. His breathing became labored, eyes clouding with pain, despite recognizing Lily's presence. With gentle hands, she carried him to his favorite sunny spot in the garden, creating comfortable bed from soft blankets. Throughout the day, Lily sat beside him, continuing normal activities within his sight, tending plants, preparing meals, writing in her journal, maintaining connection until the end. As sunset painted western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Scout's breathing stuttered then stopped entirely. His final moments came peacefully, surrounded by the garden they had built together, with Lily's hand resting lightly on his side. The faithful companion who had followed abandoned girl from gas station to mountain sanctuary had completed his remarkable journey. Lily buried Scout beneath the largest apple tree in the orchard they had restored together, marking the spot with cairn of smooth river stones and carved wooden plaque bearing his name and simple epitaph: first friend, faithful guardian, forever remembered. The ritual allowed proper acknowledgement of his significance while channeling grief into purposeful action rather than debilitating despair. The days following Scout's death brought Lily most profound solitude since gas station abandonment. Without his constant presence, soft patting of paws following her movements, reassuring warmth beside her at night, understanding in his eyes when she spoke aloud, the mountain's vastness seemed suddenly overwhelming. She maintained routines with determined focus, knowing idle hours invited debilitating grief. Garden required constant attention as harvest season approached. Both cabins needed final preparations for coming winter. Forest offered abundance requiring processing and preservation before snow closed higher elevations. During autumn's depth, Lily made decision regarding Dr. Foster's offer. The mountain had taught practical adaptation rather than rigid adherence to single approach. Jackson and Eleanor had both maintained selective engagement with civilization while preserving wilderness sanctuary as primary existence. Their example suggested balanced methodology, combining independence with strategic connection, mountain solitude providing strength, while community engagement extended protection and purpose. Her response to Dr. Foster established clear parameters: participation in summer research program with specific conditions maintaining her independence and sanctuary security. The arrangement represented evolution beyond survival toward purposeful existence, connecting mountain isolation with broader environmental protection, extending Jackson's legacy through different methodology. That winter, as snow transformed mountain landscape into crystalline wonderland and cabin fires burned steadily against deepening cold, Lily reviewed journals documenting her extraordinary journey. The fragile child who had fled gas station abandonment had transformed through wilderness challenges into capable young woman with unprecedented freedom and responsibility. Eleanor's cabin had evolved from desperate shelter into genuine home containing accumulated wisdom from multiple generations of mountain adaptation. Jackson's teaching continued through daily practices, integrating military precision with environmental awareness. Most significantly, the mountain itself had transformed in Lily's understanding, from initial sanctuary against human threat into complex ecosystem requiring protection beyond personal safety. The watershed, forest communities, wildlife populations, and interconnected environmental systems represented value transcending individual survival. Jackson had recognized this progression in her development before his death. You've moved beyond mere existence into genuine purpose. His assessment had identified fundamental transition from survival to stewardship. As spring once again brought renewal to mountain landscape, Lily stood between two cabins representing her unusual journey. Eleanor's, where she had first found shelter as abandoned child, Jackson's, where she had gained knowledge to truly thrive. Between them lay Scout's grave beneath the apple tree, marking another chapter in her remarkable story. At 16, Lily Mason stood at threshold of future neither fully isolated nor conventionally integrated. Mountain remaining her true home and sanctuary, but newly recognized possibilities for meaningful connection beyond its boundaries, creating balanced existence, drawing strength from solitude while selectively sharing unique perspectives. What began as mere survival had become something significantly more valuable, a life worth sharing when and how she chose. As spring's first wildflowers emerged through melting snow, Lily moved between cabin and garden with confident purpose. No longer lost child, but young woman who had transformed abandonment into extraordinary self-reliance. The mountain had indeed tested her as it had tested Eleanor and Jackson before her, and like them, she had not merely survived its challenges, but emerged strengthened, her spirit as resilient as forest regenerating from winter's transformation.